This is FilmBookCast.
FilmBookCast.
FilmBookCast, the official podcast of FilmBook. Get ready for the latest in film news, TV show news, and theatrical reviews. FilmBook's podcast starts now.
Hello, and welcome to FilmBookCast, the official podcast of FilmBook. I'm Kevin Allen. If you're tuning into FilmBookCast for the first time, welcome, and thank you. If you listened before, welcome back and thank you. Here are some of the stories I'll be talking about this week. Bond has been denied for the ex-police officer accused of the murder of Rayshard Brooks earlier this month in Atlanta. Actor Danny Masterson, who's most well known for playing Hyde on That 70s Show, has been arrested and charged with 3 counts of rape. The Oscars have been pushed back by 2 months due to the ongoing coronavirus crisis, and movie theater chains have revealed their timelines for reopening their cinemas. Looks like all the biggest ones will be back in business by mid-July. I'll also have a review of Shirley. Elisabeth Moss gives a stellar performance in this not quite biopic, not full-on thriller look at horror writer Shirley Jackson. I think the performance of Moss and her co-stars are better than the script. In fact, it's the acting that kept me engaged in a story that felt like it never got out of second gear. You can find more FilmBookCast podcasts on film-book.com by using the search term FilmBookCast. You can also email us at podcast@film-book.com with FilmBookCast in the subject line. No bond for the fired Atlanta police officer charged with the killing of Rayshard Brooks. Garrett Rolfe waived his right to appear before a judge in person on Friday and chose instead to appear via video link from Gwinnett County Jail. Rolfe turned himself in after being charged with 11 counts, including felony murder for shooting and killing Rayshard Brooks back on June 12 at a Wendy's drive-thru in Atlanta. Rolfe and Officer Devin Brosnan responded to a complaint that Brooks was parked and asleep in the drive-thru lane. He failed the sobriety test, and when they tried to arrest him, he scuffled with them and grabbed Brosnan's taser. That's according to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. A video of the incident shows Brooks running as he appears to point the taser in the direction of Rolfe, who shoots him twice in the back. Brosnan, who was the second officer at the scene, faced an aggravated assault charge. He was allegedly standing on Brooks' shoulders as he lay dying in the parking lot. AMC Theaters will reopen more than 400 of its cinemas next month, following a nearly 4-month shutdown caused by the coronavirus pandemic. According to Variety, AMC is aiming for theaters to be open on July 15th so that locations are fully operational for the release of Disney's Mulan on July 24th and Warner Bros. Tenet on July 31st. As part of that process, AMC is reducing its seating capacity in order to help people social distance and implementing new cleaning procedures. Hand sanitizing stations are also being installed throughout AMC theaters, and the company is encouraging contactless and cash-free concessions. Regal Cinemas has announced that it will begin reopening its locations on July 10th. Various social distancing and cleaning protocols will be in place, but if you live in a state or city where masks aren't required in public places because of the coronavirus pandemic, don't expect people to be wearing face coverings in the auditorium with you. Similarly, Cinemark is looking to have all of its theaters reopened by July 17th. On Wednesday, the company announced a phased reopening plan starting on June 19th in Texas. The rest of its locations will open between July 3rd and July 17th. That's according to CNBC. To fill the weeks before Hollywood releases new films, Cinemark plans on showing classic titles at discounted prices. Concession prices will also temporarily be reduced, and self-service fountain drinks will not be available. Like its rivals, Cinemark is instituting strict sanitary precautions for its reopening. Staggered seating, more stringent cleaning, and reduced operating hours will be implemented. Employees will wear masks and gloves during their shifts, and guests are encouraged to wear face coverings as well. It's not clear when LA's movie theaters will reopen. California health officials issued guidelines for allowing cinemas to reopen last week, but on Thursday, Los Angeles County health officials refused to give movie theaters the green light, even though bars, wineries, tattoo parlors, and nail salons were all given the go-ahead. That's according to Variety. At the time of this podcast recording, there was no explanation as to why theaters were left out. Across the country in New York City, the Big Apple hopes to reopen its theaters on July 10th. The show must go on, including the Oscars. But it's not going to happen on February 28, 2021 as originally planned. Variety now reports that the Academy is moving the ceremony back to April 25th in light of the COVID-19 crisis. The Academy recently extended release date eligibility rules. A feature film must now have a qualifying release date between January 1st, 2020 and February 28th, 2021. BAFTA also moved the date of its 2021 Film Awards in line with the Academy's decision to shift the Oscars to April. The BAFTA Awards will now be held on April 11th, exactly 2 weeks before the Oscars. The 2021 Film Independent Spirit Awards have also been postponed. They'll now be held on April 24th. Actress Kristen Stewart is set to play Princess Diana in a new movie about the late princess's split from Prince Charles. According to Deadline.com, the film is called Spencer and will reveal how Princess Di realized her marriage was over. Diane and Charles married in 1981 and separated in 1992. They divorced in 1996. Diana died the following year in a car crash in Paris. Pablo Larraín will direct a script written by Peaky Blinders creator Stephen Knight. Production on Spencer is expected to begin in early 2021. Amazon Studios has gotten the global rights to a documentary about voter suppression featuring politician, lawyer, and author Stacey Abrams. The documentary comes from Oscar-nominated and Emmy-winning filmmaker Liz Garbus and Oscar-nominated filmmaker Lisa Cortez, and the plan is for Amazon to release the documentary in theaters prior to this year's U.S. presidential election. Following its theatrical release, the documentary will be released on Amazon Prime Video. According to Deadline.com, the documentary takes a look at the history and current activism against voter suppression and barriers to voting that most people don't even know is a threat to their basic rights as citizens of the United States. Stacey Abrams is a New York Times best-selling author and nonprofit CEO who served for 11 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, 7 as a Democratic leader. In 2018, Abrams became the Democratic nominee for governor of Georgia, winning more votes than any other Democrat in the state's history. Abrams was the first black woman to become the gubernatorial nominee of a major party in the United States, and she was the first black woman and first Georgian to deliver a response to the State of the Union address. A classically trained Shakespearean actor who became known for film performances including Bilbo Baggins in Lord of the Rings, Chariots of Fire, and Alien has passed away. Variety reports that Ian Holm died on Friday. He had been battling Parkinson's disease for a number of years. Holm was widely celebrated for his performances in King Lear and Harold Pinter's The Homecoming. He eventually adapted his stage performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream for the big screen in the late 1960s. Holm was nominated for an Oscar in 1982 for his supporting role in Chariots of Fire. He also regularly worked on British TV series such as The Borrowers, Bells, Mr. and Mrs. Edgehill, We the Accused, and Game Set Match. Ian Holm was 88. Let's take a look at some movie trailers. If you're going to be stuck in a Groundhog Day-like time loop, it's nice to have someone along for the ride.
It's one of those infinite time loop situations you might have heard about.
That I might have heard about.
Yeah.
Palm Springs stars Andy Samberg and Kristen Milotti as Niles and Sarah. The pair have a chance encounter at a Palm Springs wedding and end up finding themselves on an endless loop. The predicament forces the two to get pretty existential as well as make some reckless decisions, including ruining the wedding that brought them to Palm Springs in the first place. Palm Springs premiered earlier this year at the Sundance Film Festival and was well received. It lands on Hulu on July 10th. We've all sent an email and then totally regretted it. Well, what if you couldn't hit the undo button? How far would you go to prevent that message from being read?
If Jared reads that email, my life is over.
Oh my God.
Would it be insane if I went to Mexico and erased the email?
That's the premise of Desperados, coming to Netflix on July 3rd. Nassim Petrad stars as Wesley, a woman on a mission to save her love life by trekking all the way to Mexico to delete an angry email before her lovely new beau has a chance to read it. Anna Camp and Sarah Burns also star in this comedy. Turning to a sequel that probably very few people would have expected, we're getting a first look at Deep Blue Sea 3. The original came out in 1999, number 2 didn't come out until 2018, and now apparently the sea is even deeper and bluer?
Those sharks have been altered, engineered, they're not sharks!
And by deeper and bluer, I mean still filled with person-eating sharks. Tanya Raymond stars as Emma Collins, a marine biologist who's trapped along with her crew on a mid-ocean laboratory that's surrounded by the deadly sharks. Deep Blue Sea 3 lands on digital on July 28th. Jude Law and Carrie Coon star in an upcoming movie called The Nest, where a couple's marriage descends into anger and resentment.
You're embarrassing.
And you're exhausting.
I paid our rent. I paid for Ben's school. I bought you a car. I bought you a horse. I paid for construction on your barn.
You're delusional.
According to the official synopsis from IFC Films, Rory, who's played by Law, is an ambitious entrepreneur. He persuades his American wife, Allison, who's played by Coon, and their children to leave the comforts of suburban America and return to his native England. Sensing opportunity, Rory rejoins his former commodities firm and leaves a century-old country manor with grounds for Allison's horses and plans to build a stable. Soon, the promise of a lucrative new beginning starts to unravel, and the couple have to face unwelcome truths lying beneath the surface of their marriage. The Nest is expected to hit theaters on September 18th. Actor Danny Masterson is accused of raping 3 women. The former That 70s Show co-star was arrested on Wednesday. Prosecutors say the 44-year-old forcibly raped 3 women in separate incidents between 2001 and 2003. The actor's attorney released a statement saying in part, quote, "Mr. Masterson is innocent and we're confident that he will be exonerated when all the evidence finally comes to light." Masterson is currently out on $3.3 million bail. His arraignment is scheduled for September 18th. According to Variety, Masterson has been under investigation by the LAPD since late 2016. He was dropped from the Netflix series The Ranch in December 2017 amid renewed focus on sexual misconduct in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein scandal. Comedian and actor Chris D'Elia is responding to allegations that he harassed underage girls on social media. In a statement, D'Elia said in part, quote, "I know I have said and done things that might offend other people during my career, but I've never knowingly pursued any underage women at any point." D'Elia has made 3 comedy specials at Netflix. At the time of this podcast recording, all were still available through the streaming service. The comedian also had a 3-episode arc on the Netflix series You last year, in which he played a man who menaces a 15-year-old girl. D'Elia's character was killed off and won't be appearing in the upcoming season. More rule changes to the 72nd Emmy Awards, including a restructuring of how nominees are selected. The number of each nominees per category will now be based on the number of submissions in each category. Paired performer categories, such as supporting actor in a comedy and supporting actress in a comedy, will have parity in the number of nominations. The new rule eliminates the previous 2% rule, which specified that in categories with 5 nominees, if the 5th and 6th top vote getters were within 2% of each other, both would be nominated. The Emmys are currently set to be held on September 20th, and whether or not that ends up being the date, Jimmy Kimmel will be hosting. Earlier this week, it was announced that Kimmel will be returning to host for the 3rd time. He previously hosted in 2012 and 2016. It's still not clear what this year's Emmys will look like. ABC, which will air the award show, has acknowledged that the nature of its plans are fluid as the world continues to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. I should also note that Kimmel is taking some time off from hosting his late-night show. On Thursday, Kimmel assured his fans that nothing's wrong, he just needs a break. So Kimmel will be taking the summer off. Jimmy Kimmel Live will be on a previously scheduled 2-week hiatus starting Monday, and then after that, a series of guest hosts will fill in for him. With civil unrest across the country and the recent anniversary of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, HBO is making the first season of Watchmen free to watch on HBO.com and on demand between June 19th and June 21st. The first episode of Watchmen focuses on the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, also referred to as the Tulsa Race Riot, the Greenwood Massacre, or the Black Wall Street Massacre. It took place on May 31st and June 1st, 1921. Mobs of white people attacked black residents and businesses in the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It has been called the single worst incident of racial violence in American history. Quibi, which was envisioned as a mobile-only platform, now wants to get on bigger screens. According to Variety, Quibi is in talks with Roku and Amazon for building apps for their TV-connected platforms. In Amazon's case, that would include Fire TV devices. Quibi built a mobile-only streaming platform in hopes of appealing to always-on-the-go millennials, but the service launched on April 6, just a few weeks after large parts of the U.S. went under coronavirus lockdown, so the whole watching-on-the-go thing didn't seem as important to many people. In fact, many Quibi users were frustrated that they couldn't watch Quibi on TV. The company says being able to cast the TVs has always been planned, but the timeline was accelerated after the coronavirus hit. 30 Rock is back, at least for one night. The cast of the beloved sitcom will return for a remotely produced event that will also double as an upfront event for NBC Universal Properties. According to Variety, the special will air on July 16th at 8 p.m. on NBC, and it will feature Tina Fey, Alec Baldwin, Tracy Morgan, Jane Krakowski, Jack McBrayer, and others reprising their 30 Rock roles. The return of 30 Rock comes as ABC also recently aired a new episode of Parks and Recreation, featuring the show's stars reprising their roles in an all-new story. 30 Rock's cast of characters aren't the only ones making a comeback, so is Law & Order's Elliot Stabler. On Tuesday, NBC officially said the Law & Order SVU spinoff, Law & Order Organized Crime, would be a part of its fall schedule. According to a press release, actor Christopher Maloney will reprise his role as Elliot Stabler, who returns to the NYPD to battle organized crime after a devastating personal loss. The show will air on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. after SVU, which stars Marisa Hargitay, and is kicking off its 22nd season. Time for a peek at some TV trailers. HBO Max has a new animated comedy from the creator of Regular Show. It's called Close Enough, and the show focuses on a married couple, their 5-year-old daughter, and their 2 divorced best friends/roommates who are all trying to piece together a life in Los Angeles.
It's gonna be okay.
Is it, Josh? Because we have no money and we live with a divorced couple in a cramped apartment.
Close Enough stars J.G. Quintel and Gabriel Walsh. It premieres on HBO Max on July 9th. A reimagining of the Arthurian legend is coming to Netflix next month.
This sword belongs to the one true king. But what if the sword chooses a queen?
Curse stars Catherine Langford as Nimue, a young woman with a mysterious gift who is destined to become the powerful and tragic Lady of the Lake. After her mother's death, Nimue finds an unexpected partner in Arthur, a humble mercenary who's on a quest to find Merlin and deliver an ancient sword. The show is based on the graphic novel of the same name by Tom Wheeler and Frank Miller. Cursed lands on Netflix on July 17th. Hannah is coming back to Amazon Prime Video for Season 2. Based on the new trailer, the titular main character is fighting for her freedom from a secret American government program.
So you make up their names, their families, and their pretend lives?
Yes, I do.
Well, I already have a name.
Hannah Season 1 was based on the 2011 film of the same name. It followed the journey of a young girl with extraordinary skills as she evaded the pursuit of an off-the-book CIA agent and tried to unearth the truth behind her identity. In other words, a teenage female Jason Bourne-like character. With most of the film's plot covered in the first season, there's lots of opportunity for the show's sophomore season to surprise fans. Hannah hits Amazon Prime Video on July 3rd. Finally, in this week's TV trailer roundup, another page from the badass female protagonist file. Warrior Nun on Netflix is inspired by the comic book series by Ben Dunn. A young woman named Ava wakes up in a morgue with inexplicable powers. Her search for answers brings her to the Order of the Cruciform Sword, a secret society of warrior nuns sworn to protect the world from evil. But Ava's not exactly sure she wants to be a superhero.
Hell will rise up, heaven will fall. How did our greatest weapon against evil end up in an unbeliever?
As is often the case with ancient wars between good and evil, Ava will be forced to juggle her responsibilities as the chosen one with those of a normal teenager. Alba Baptista stars, Warrior Nun premieres on Netflix on July 2nd. This week's movie review spotlight is on Shirley, directed by Josephine Decker. Sarah Grubin wrote the screenplay, which was adapted from a novel by Susan Scarf Merrill. Shirley is a look at horror writer Shirley Jackson, although there's very much a Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf vibe to this movie, thanks to a young, wide-eyed couple butting heads with an older, squabbling one. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The movie introduces Jackson, who's played superbly by Elisabeth Moss, as a near-bedridden wreck who's living in Vermont with her English professor husband Stanley. He's played by Michael Stuhlbarg. Fred Nemser, who's played by Logan Lerman, has arrived for a teaching gig along with his new pregnant bride named Rose. Rose is played by Odessa Young. Rose ends up getting enlisted to perform work around the house, but her main job turns out to be serving as a companion to Shirley, who's working on a new novel. Shirley is very abrasive, while Stanley is creepily lecherous, pawing at Rose at every opportunity. Based on how they get treated, it's a little unbelievable that the Nemsers don't just leave shortly after moving in, but the film kind of explains that away by saying Fred wants to stay in Stanley's good graces so he can eventually get a tenured professorship. Shirley's working on a novel based on the disappearance of a college girl. Rose gets enlisted to help her investigate. The story eventually becomes driven by the evolving dynamic between Rose and Shirley, who even becomes sexually involved. I don't think Shirley is much for romance, so I can't really say romantically involved. Interestingly, Rose and Shirley sort of trade places as the movie progresses. Shirley, who appears rough and disheveled early in the movie, starts to gain more control of herself, while Rose starts to spiral out of control. That's probably because Rose drops out of school to tend to Shirley and Stanley's home, and ends up a work widow as Fred chases tenure. But Fred is chasing tail at least as much as he's chasing tenure, which leads to a confrontation, and then a final scene with Rose and Shirley standing atop a cliff in the middle of the woods. Without spoiling too much, let me say that the ending gives the movie a feeling of one of Jackson's stories, and I think fans of Jackson's work will appreciate how the film wraps up. I'd like to give special kudos to Elisabeth Moss, who stars as Shirley. She's amazing as a tortured artist who's just an inch away from exploding at any given moment. In fact, I think the performance of the main characters is so good that they elevate a script that's otherwise just okay. The film is worth watching for Moss's performance alone, even if you're not familiar with Shirley Jackson's literary work. And at the end of the day, that's an accomplishment. Give Shirley a watch. Thank you for listening to this episode of FilmBookCast. You can find more of my work on film-book.com. Just search for Kevin Allen or FilmBookCast. You can also find me on Twitter at KAllenNYC. If you listen to this podcast on iTunes or another podcast service, please rate and review this episode. If you're listening to this podcast on our YouTube channel, FilmBook Podcast, please like our video, subscribe to our channel, and leave us a comment in the comment section. It helps other people discover our podcast. Please also consider becoming one of our patrons on Patreon at patreon.com/filmbook. Your support helps us create more engaging content. You'll find our Patreon link below in the description. If you want to tweet about this podcast, use the hashtag FilmBookCast. Tune in next week for a new episode of FilmBookCast. Thanks for listening. I'm Kevin Allen. And remember, Black Lives Matter.